Even with 15 years of therapy experience, even with everything I had learned from my mental health, how I dug myself out from the depths of bipolar disorder to starting my own business that was making money, I was like, this shit is fucking emotional.
Scout, welcome back to Under the Influence podcast.
Oh my God, when I was a guest, we weren't even friends.
Isn't that wild?
We were like, I think Whitney's the coolest, and I know you were like, Scout is the coolest, but we hadn't made that intimate connection.
No. And I asked you to speak at my very first event.
That is so incredibly wild to me that you did that. I think your judgment reader was way fucking off.
But you say this.
Lauren Bostic from The Skinny Confidential and Scout, who started blogging a year ago, I was like, I obviously I didn't know what it was before you invited me. It was my wedding that weekend, which is such a bummer that you weren't there, but you know. We were friends, so you weren't invited at that point in my life. But still question you and your judgment.
Okay, but do you though? Because after all the things that you've done, I actually had a really good radar. Okay. It was just early.
You had good trend forecasting.
Totally.
Like a talent manager.
I am. Like I did, dude. That would have been a career choice for me. Okay, so let's take a step back. You have gone from blogging to having a podcast.
Yes.
In fact, I'm pretty sure you were one of the first people I actually knew that had a podcast.
Yes.
It was called just Scout, right? Or by Scout?
It was called Podcast by Scout.
Podcast by Scout. And now you have an agency, which I want to talk about because you launched your agency, correct, 3 years ago?
Over 3 years ago.
Over 3 years ago. Okay. So I have had Ekis for 5. So I had only maybe had 2 years on you a little bit. Mm-hmm. But I want to talk about that as well as the book.
Yeah.
And so let's kind of go back to Scout blogging.
Yes.
What led to an agency move?
So I was probably at that point like 25. And I was in a little bit of a career shift. I was experiencing a little bit of burnout and didn't feel as if I was ready to go back and work for somebody else. And I had already caught the entrepreneurial bug at that point. I started a magazine at the age of 22 and it was in Barnes & Noble and had Halsey on the cover. So I felt as if I needed a year to reassess where I was. Mm-hmm. And I started blogging because influencers were starting. And I remember thinking that their lifestyle was amazing and their work from home capabilities were awesome. So I started blogging, and the blog led me to start Podcast by Scout, which I started that podcast because I lived next to a wholesale produce store.
I remember this.
Up a media, like a podcast studio for fun. And so they're like, we'll produce yours for a year for free because we're just figuring this out. And so that's really how I got started in the podcast, was because where I bought my groceries across the street, opened a podcast studio, and they did it for me for free. So I did Podcast by Scout for about a year, and I didn't treat it like a business because, and I really stand by this for any of the entrepreneurs listening, everything was done for me. So I wasn't as invested in the project. I think in the beginning, you doing everything it like roots you in to the business in a way. And so about probably a year into it, I was with my sister. We were at the Ojai Valley Inn and Spa, a couple rosés deep for her birthday, had a massage by the pool, and I literally didn't have a podcast episode. I'm going to just go real fast. Fast forward here. So she jumped on. We recorded it in the business center at the hotel room. Those clearly exist. And it was so fun. There was something between us that was really great, and my podcast was feeling stale. So I ended up shutting that down and starting Okay Sis Podcast with my sister. Yeah. And that's really where the Scout that stands today in her career kind of stemmed from, because my sister and I decided to treat Okay Sis with a strategic mind. I remember we actually hopped on a call with you in the beginning. And what started happening in those first early months of Okay Sis was that we were having huge guests on. And
I remember that.
Yes, I had like a little bit of a blogger presence, but by no means was I supposed to be in a room with Vanessa Grimaldi, who just won The Bachelor. Right?
Yeah.
And so I started to recognize the power of podcasting, but the agency started 6 months after Okay Sis, because I recognized that when we would have female entrepreneurs on our podcast, our community would follow them online, buy their product, sign up for their newsletter, read their book. And so that's when my wheels started turning, in the sense of, being a guest on a podcast, which is now known as today the podcast tour that my agency, Scouts Agency, is helping.
And I'm going to jump in. I'm so sorry. Can you tell us exactly what Scouts Agency does? Because we didn't even get to that point yet.
Oh, yeah. So Scouts Agency today is the leading agency in running podcast tours for female entrepreneurs. Mm-hmm. So essentially, we are a PR agency. We do traditional PR, but we specialize in taking female entrepreneurs, personal brands, authors, solopreneurs, thought leaders, and placing them as guests on podcasts to tell their stories and spread their mission in business.
And you represent me. Hi.
Yeah. Hi.
Okay. So from this, and again, we haven't even talked about Okay Sis, but Okay Sis has now become just this phenomenon of a podcast and a show, right? You guys are a part of Podcast Nation.
Yes.
And you guys have this audience that you've built. And then you were able to also see like, okay, wait a minute, there's a market for me helping other female entrepreneurs.
Yes, to be a guest on podcasts as like a PR strategy. Because over 3 years ago, the idea of a podcast tour wasn't a part of an agency service or a strategy. Yeah.
No, and I feel like, again, going back to that time, because like what year was this around?
This was 2019 that I started the agency.
Okay, so I feel like in 2019, if I'm remembering correctly, podcasts were like a thing.
Yes.
But it wasn't a big thing.
So podcasts were a thing in the sense that there were some main players in the space, but they weren't a content platform or medium that every female entrepreneur and every best friend duo and every influencer jumped on. That started happening in 2020.
Yeah.
But back then there were still Mads even thought the space was too saturated when we hopped in.
Wow.
So podcasting was something that podcasters did, and now podcasting is something that
everyone does. Yeah, absolutely. So my next question is, why should female entrepreneurs even investigate the podcast space? Like, what's the benefit? Because I think, again, like we see marketing agencies, we see PR agencies, and then now we are starting to see this rise of like what you do and actually people working on their personal brand with other agencies and having them kind of help and grow their name.
Well, I think everybody's goal, whether you're an influencer, an author, or an entrepreneur, is to grow your business.
Sure.
To grow your following, to grow your sales, to grow your client load, etc. And so you need an exposure strategy and a brand awareness strategy. We're struggling. We're all struggling a little bit on social media. So we're struggling. And the content machine, I think, is getting to some of us as far as the way we grow our businesses. And traditional PR, while incredible for certain companies, like I find traditional PR to be the most effective for product-based brands and for personal brands who are experts. So dietitians, something like that.
Sure.
Traditional PR, there's a really big misconception amongst the landscape that traditional PR catapults your brand to the next level.
Yeah.
And there's, a little bit of a disappointment at times for someone who's making 1 million fucking TikToks and it's not going anywhere. And so
we're both speaking from personal experience on that one.
So I think that everybody's looking for a new way to connect with new audiences. And so the special thing about the podcast strategy is that on TikTok, on Instagram, on Twitter, on YouTube, you really have 3 seconds or less to capture somebody's attention. And by all means, every strategy has to go in tandem with a social media strategy. You can't ignore the social media stuff.
Yeah.
But the podcast is the answer to the person who wants a little bit more depth, who wants to get in front of an audience for an hour. I mean, there's no other digital content platform that allows you to talk to a new engaged audience for up to an hour.
Yeah.
And I think in a world of curation and filters and editing, and even journalists edit an article and make you sound however they want you to sound, podcasting is really intimate and vulnerable. And I think we both know with the rise of the personal brand that people are doing business with founders. They're not really doing business with products or services anymore.
No.
They do it because they resonate with the founder. So implementing a podcast strategy, if you're an author or a coach or an entrepreneur, is a really, really beautiful way to really connect deeply with a new audience, to take the human first approach to your business marketing and to develop that loyal new community member that comes in through a podcast.
Sure. Absolutely. So, and I love to, I mean, I feel like you always say this and I feel like I want to kind of echo this, but one of the things that you told me early on, and one of the things I think we've both seen is a podcast is one of the greatest ways to network because whether or not you
have a fucking scam. Everybody get on.
But it is so true because it's like one of these things where we see again, I do it all the time to connect with other entrepreneurs when I actually want to hear their story or want to hear their secret sauce. And a lot of them don't say no. Like it's usually a really easy ask or a really easy, instant yes.
Now they have to pay agencies like myself X amount to get on. So if you have a podcast, I mean, I always say, let's say you want to be a health coach, right? Or a nutritionist coach, and you have a very specific subset. If you start a podcast, you can ask every role model you have on the face of this planet to be a guest, and you are intimately networking with them.
Yeah.
You cannot ask those people for coffee.
Yeah.
You cannot ask those people for an hour in their calendar. It doesn't work anymore. So the reason my sister and I have the network that we have is because we've been able to ask all these incredible female entrepreneurs onto our podcast. And the ROI of that, not only is it the best networking tool in the world, but when I launched my book, The Emotional Entrepreneur, I called on everyone I had interviewed on Okay Sis to support, just letting them know I want to send them a book or including them in a quote in my book. And collectively, the week of launch, I had, I think, around 7 to 8 million followers total.
Wow.
Posting. And that was, I didn't spend money on that. That was the power of my network.
Wow.
And the power of my network came because I asked these women to be a guest on my podcast.
Sure. That's beautiful. So let's kind of move into that. So you wrote the book, The Emotional Entrepreneur, and it is kind of a collection of your story, kind of going through what you went through with bipolar, moving into really becoming an entrepreneur and the lessons that you've learned. I want to hear, number one, more about the name, because I think the emotional entrepreneur, as an entrepreneur, we have so much stigma where it's, it's nothing personal. Business doesn't involve emotion. I don't know what there's quite a few things that we kind of go through when we're early on in our stages, but you kind of wrote this book on why it is emotional and why it does really play into your mental health and who you are in your own personal journey. What kind of led you to writing that, or to kind of wanting to take a stance on that?
Well, I exhibited mental health and emotional problems or challenges by the time I was 4 or 5 years old. And then those really came to fruition and started haunting me at the age of 14 when I had my first depressive episode. And then at the age of 20, which was 10 years ago, almost 11 years ago now, I was formally diagnosed with bipolar disorder, and I had to drop out of college. And I went through an experience that was very clinical on the mental health side. I was locked up on a 5150 because they told me I was a threat to myself and society. I went through outpatient twice. I have dealt with symptoms that range from catatonia to psychosis to paranoia to suicidal ideation, hypomania, depression, and anxiety. And in, between the ages of 14 to 22, I really dipped in and out of being unable to function.
Yeah.
And so my mid-20s were really about healing and taking radical responsibility over my emotional state and the cards that I was dealt with this mental illness. And so I am obviously no stranger to therapy and mental health, where, again, a lot of the scarier, more clinical side of what mental health can look like. But when I started my business, I'll first say that I found entrepreneurship at 22 and a light bulb went off in my head. I went from the girl who couldn't even be a gelato scooper, right? Or hold an internship, to finding entrepreneurship and over-functioning. All of a sudden my brain worked. All of a sudden there was a path within society that I could be successful in. And that meant a lot for me because, my therapists, my doctors, and my loved ones were wondering if I would ever be able to stand on my own 2 feet and support myself. So when I had found entrepreneurship, I knew there was a path for me, and that gave me a lot of hope, gave me a lot of purpose. It gave me a sense of dreaming. So with this in mind, that entrepreneurship was something that lit me up and gave me a purpose and a passion and allowed me to move forward in a successful way, I always wanted to get back to that, and I always wanted to be an entrepreneur who could financially sustain herself. But as entrepreneurs don't often talk about, usually the first couple of years are like trying a million bajillion things that don't actually work. Yeah. Blogging was one of those. I think I started a social media agency for 2 months, etc. But when I started Scout's agency, one of my main objectives was to make money and have this be a financially successful, not just viable business.
Yeah.
And so once it started getting real, I started realizing that even with 15 years of therapy experience, even with everything I had learned from my mental health, how I had dug myself out from the depths of bipolar disorder to starting my own business that was making money, I was like, this shit is fucking emotional. And I realized really quickly that it wasn't my ability to manage my P&L sheet, or it wasn't my ability to come up with a genius marketing plan, or it wasn't my ability to organize the best CRM software, or even come up with the best product that was going to make me successful. What was going to make me successful in business is if I managed my relationship to anxiety, to uncertainty, to risk, if I was able to emotionally check in at all of those challenging moments that we've had as entrepreneurs. I had one this morning, stepped outside and cried on Fifth Avenue in Hillcrest for a second, came back into the office, did my thing. That was going to be the thing that either destroyed me or catapulted me forward. Yeah. My relationship with abundance versus scarcity, my self-doubt, how much I believed in myself. And so all of a sudden I recognized that my business is going to soar proportionate to how well of a handle I had on my personal development and my emotions. Yeah. And so I was able to call in all of the tools that I had cultivated through managing my mental illness and apply them to my business, because very quickly on, I said, I'm a people pleaser, and now I'm in a client-based industry. This is going to swallow me whole if I don't deal with this. And so that was kind of the catapult, or the realization that entrepreneurship and mental health are very, very intrinsically linked. And not only that, the entrepreneur's job is to be as emotionally healthy as possible, because they really are the ceiling in which the business lives. And so if you work on yourself internally, the ceiling gets higher and higher and higher for your business. And that's the reason we hit 6-figure revenue in year one. Yeah. It wasn't because I knew how to run clients. I'd never even worked for a PR agency, people. Like, never even heard of it. Like, I don't know any of this, right? And so it's because I was emotionally able to be resilient in that first year.
Wow. I think you're touching on, I think the way that you just said that is something that we talk about in passing, but we don't actually really understand, because I think one of the things with being an entrepreneur is exactly what you said, is that the ceiling ends with you, right? So, we can dive in and become these workaholics and do all these things. And I think you even saw that with my own journey with my agency. It really wasn't until I completely changed up my lifestyle, came back to kind of this why, or came back to what I was doing, or really took a hard look at like my own energy or what I was doing for myself, until I kind of broke that next level of revenue.
Yeah. And I will say, you can take this out if you want, if it's too personal for your podcast.
No,
that you broke your next level of revenue when you dealt with the issue of why you wouldn't commit to full-time employees on your team. Truly. That seems like a strategic thing, right? Yeah. But it's not a strategic thing.
Sure.
Where was the fear in you that you had to really build out and prioritize a team that was like really long-standing in W-2 versus independent contractor, which is something I talk about all the time with agency owners. Yeah. That seems upfront like a business strategy, but it's not. There was an emotional block.
Yeah, there was fear
from there. Yeah. And then once you did that, your like revenue like fucking doubled in like 2 months.
It did. It was wild.
It's crazy.
So I want to move into, if you're open to talking about it, which I know you are, but like, if you want to, I want to talk about this mastermind that we went through.
Oh yeah.
Because I think I get a lot of questions about, do I have a coach? And I'm sure you get this too. Or do you go to therapy, or who do you talk to business about, friends or community or things like that? So tell me a little bit about, number one, how were you able to take this mastermind and kind of use it to this next level, or kind of bring you up to this next level in business?
The one that we did together?
Yeah.
Yeah. So we joined an incredible 6-month mastermind. It was a really intimate container it was really you, me, and our friend Lauren, who became our friend because of the mastermind. But I don't have friends who are entrepreneurs. I have you. That's pretty much it to this level. And that's why, you and I are so similar in the way that we operate. It's almost kind of scary. So I feel like since we're so similar, we can be really honest and push each other and understand those moments. But that mastermind was a place for me to learn how to or to have the availability to vulnerably connect to other women on those emotional lows.
Yeah.
With the fear, with the risk, with the anxiety. I remember voice noting you guys like in a total state. I felt like I was a balloon that was about to pop of scarcity after my book launch, because I had taken on so much expenses and invested so much and hadn't seen the return in 4 days. I was like crying around I was like literally walking around the block screaming and crying, and then a cat was chasing me and you were on the phone with me. It's like, if anyone says this is like such a weird, I'm like,
oh my God, I remember this day.
Following me, and I'm afraid of cats. But the point is that it allowed me a space, and allowed all of us, I think, a space for those really, really, really vulnerable moments where you don't think you're going to make it, and you do have self-doubt, and the load seems too hard to bear, and things feel really heavy in your business. You need a space to talk that through, because those moments are normal. Yeah. You are not a business owner if you don't want to quit your business once a month, period. End of story. Yeah, we all do it. We all do it, right? And so that mastermind not only gave me the ability to express those emotions and move that energy, it also gave, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, it gave us an opportunity to be reflected back the truth, because when we're emotionally really, really heightened, we don't really see the truth, right? And so it allowed a place to ground, to center, to move the energy, and then to come back to the emotional support in a way that was non-judgmental. Because let's face it, if I called my husband or my dad in these moments, they'd be like, oh no, we're going down. But you guys were able to safely hold that and bring me back up to equilibrium.
Yeah. I mean, I think that was also one of the biggest learnings, or one of the biggest benefits I had too, was even, I've told you my story, but in the very beginning years of Ekis, I mean, I had people say, I wasn't entrepreneurial material. I had people say, I had my dad being like, do we need to call this quits? Like, this seems like this is too much. And I was super emotional. Yeah. Like, I would cry in the office. Like, I really didn't know if I was doing anything correctly. And having you guys as that support, like you said, reflection, I felt like, number one, I could relate to you guys and vice versa. But then you guys also kind of held this mirror in front of me being like, no, look at everything you're doing. Like, look at all the progress you are making, or look at what, maybe what you are doing as a leader that's not getting you to this next level, which I feel like was, a huge part of my growth, especially in 2021.
Yeah. That holding up the mirror is because when you get in scarcity, or when you get in overwhelm, let's face it, your thoughts lie to you. Suddenly you put on different sunglasses and you're seeing a completely different reality. Yeah. And that reality is quite subjective. And so having that space for other people to reflect the actual reality, to like switch your glasses real quick, is extremely, extremely helpful. And also, like, everyone wants to die their first year of this. I know. That's the thing, is that I don't know how many times I can say it out loud. Like, this is not, I was actually outside crying earlier today, maybe because I'm pregnant and running a business and all this stuff. But I was outside crying. I just had a moment, and like Mumford & Sons was playing, and I just started crying. And then I reminded myself, now when I cry, it's not oh no, this is too hard. This isn't working. I need to back out. It's I made a conscious decision that I was going to live a life that stretches me. I made a conscious decision to live every single thing to the fullest, to experience new experiences. And in experiencing new experiences, you have to go through growing pains. Yeah. It's in those moments where you're being stretched that real meaning gets kind of like oozed out of you in many ways. Yeah. And then beautiful strength forms, and you have a gold statue at the end of the day, right? And so now when I get really upset, I say to myself, this is one of those stretching moments. I am being asked to stretch. I signed up for this. I decided to not have a comfy emotional life. I decided to have an emotionally uncomfortable life, because I value growth, and I've seen what happens. You've seen what happens. Every single time you and I go through a business stretch where we feel like we are utterly tapped out and exhausted and don't know if this is working and are confused and scared, incredible things happen on the other end. And this is not to say pain, inflict pain to create growth. It's just more a conversation around accepting that really big things come with really big, hard moments. Yeah. And reframing this idea that we are owed an easy, successful, win the lottery, fast-filled business life, because that's just never the case. And so going through a mastermind and having friends like you, we now know those moments are a part of the game, and we're willing to go through them for a bigger purpose.
Yeah. My God, I don't think I could have said it better myself. Yeah, I think I want to move on to my next question because I think you just nailed it.
That's good.
Okay, so gold star for you. So what is next? Obviously, I know what's next, but I want to hear this new take on the emotional entrepreneur that you're moving into, because you've also started the Emotional Entrepreneur podcast and started kind of talking more about this concept, which is such a beautiful, insanely powerful idea of, again, the emotionalness meets this businessness. So what's on the horizon? What's happening?
So I'm actually in the process this week. I feel like it's really becoming quite clear to me. We do have an exciting launch coming in August. So
yay!
Follow me on Instagram at Sobel to get notified of that. Whitney and her ex-marketing team are helping me with building out that brand. But I'm getting really, really clear on who the emotional entrepreneur serves and what it can be. Obviously, launching the book last year was facet number 1, and then having this emotional entrepreneur podcast is facet number 2. Okay. But now really, how can we support the entrepreneurs out there who are dealing with imposter syndrome, anxiety, fear, don't know what to do when a client's upset with them, boundaries around work, all the emotional parts that come with growth. So I really see the emotional entrepreneur, and you'll find out the third facet of it in August, is going to be a destination for women to feel support, get the resources they need. And it's a really big identity shift out of, listen, I love hustling more than next person. And I know a lot of people don't like to, but I'm like down with like the girl boss, like the boss babe vibe. You know what I mean? I really am.
You just can't use that word anymore. It's just too overdone. I get it. But
you know what I mean? Like, I'm down with all that. I'm not someone who's going to say, preach more ease in business, because that's not how I operate.
Sure.
But the emotional entrepreneur is bringing a new level of support that is emotional, that does prioritize healing, that does prioritize mental health, and not just rest, but nourishing rest, like really taking care of yourself. So that's kind of on the horizon, really developing this out as a resource for women who are on the entrepreneurial path, but don't have that mastermind to go cry to, and don't feel as if their emotions are valid in business, or don't understand that their emotions are probably the secret sauce to their business's success.
Yeah. Wow.
So it's a lot of that. Yeah.
That sounds incredible. I love the destination. I think that's so needed. And I think too, one of the other questions I get is, how do I join a mastermind, or how do I hire a coach? But I don't have, a couple grand to spend.
Yes.
And I love that this sounds like this is kind of the next level to that.
Yeah. I mean, it's free too. So
yeah.
That's cool. The podcast is free. The book's $15. The launch in August will be free. And then I'm sure eventually there'll be other paid options. But if anyone really needs support today and now, I know that coaches provide a lot of one-on-one support that might be at a higher retainer, but they also support a lot of workshops for like $25, $30, $50 a pop, or 6-week programs that are, $800 that you can spread out over a couple months. And I do just want to say this real quick, that investing in a higher ticket number and stretching yourself in that is part of the process.
Sure.
It's part of the expansion. So if you're sitting here and saying you can't afford it, that might be true in some cases. And I think it's probably a lie in most. I think maybe you can't afford the $10,000 one.
Sure.
But there's one for $300 that you can sign up for a couple weeks to get your toes wet. And I think that something that I've learned so significantly is that when I invest in myself, not in the nice dinner, not in the clothing you just bought, not in the fancy skincare, not in et cetera, when I invest in myself, my life opens up tremendously, and I have gotten very comfortable investing in myself. I put down cash because I understand how that opens up my life. And so if you are saying you can't afford it, I think that is a limiting belief, because there are so many ways to get involved with a coach that you admire on Instagram. Every coach, if they're a good coach, has multiple tiered options. You don't have to just sign up for a one-on-one today. So this is just my invitation to comfy up that anxiety. Believe me, when I signed up for my coach, I was like, this is the craziest thing I've ever done. This is so much money. So I just invite you to maybe reframe what actually is possible for you in the level of support that you need.
I love that so much. Okay, we're going to run through a couple rapid fire questions.
Okay, I'm speaking so fast.
Yeah, you're doing a really good job,
Thank
though.
you. Oh my gosh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, I know.
I'm like hot and I'm out of breath because that's a pregnancy symptom. Oh, and what's next? Is that I will have a baby in November. And what that is teaching me in my business is to cut the fat, to reduce the excess things that I do that don't actually move the needle. Yeah. And to get very, very clear and focused on the things that do move me forward and do light me up. Yeah. Since my pregnancy has not been an easy one thus far. And I'm already getting used to the idea that my energy and time is so much more limited than it ever has been. And I think that's actually a really big asset because I'm doing the things that are like a clear shot to success, in my opinion.
I love that. Well, I mean, and it's kind of like, it kind of prioritizes a lot of it, right? Because you're like, you're pregnant. You now have this whole other thing on your mind. You probably have less energy. So now you're like, I need to kind of streamline everything.
Yeah, I'm actually saying no to people. I've been telling myself to say no for years. Right. And now I'm like, I can't get on that 30-minute call to help you out with a networking thing because I don't know you. So before they're like, yeah, sure, you read my book. I'll give you 5 hours of my day. So it's been very helpful. But that's also the next thing is me navigating motherhood and entrepreneurship.
I love that. Okay, well, let's dive into some rapid fire. Okay. What is your go-to self-care practice?
Probably in the morning, it's journaling. That's always kind of something that helps me move energy. And then at night, if I just feel like I'm not shutting off, putting my phone away and getting in a bath or reading, but just really removing myself from technology.
I love that. What are you reading right now?
Right now I'm reading Something for Stone. It's Finding for Stone or Setting for Stone. It's I forgot the name. Abraham Verghese is it's an incredible book. It's like on the bestseller list for
I'll try to find the link and link it.
Oh, Cutting for Stone.
Okay.
It's like a 700-page book. It's an incredible novel, just beautifully crafted. I'm a big literature person, so the fiction I read has to be pretentiously good. So I'm reading that, and then I'm also reading Rich as Fuck by Amanda Frances to work on.
Oh, yeah. You said you really like that.
Oh, you got it.
Yeah?
You got it.
Okay, I'll add it to my list. Okay. What is right now, your go-to mocktail?
Actually flavored drinks are making my stomach hurt.
Ooh, like natural, like artificial flavors?
Or anything like that. It's kind
interesting.
Of a bummer. My stomach is highly sensitive when I'm pregnant, so I'll just go for my regular alcoholic beverage, which is, I'll give that advice, which is a Sauvignon Blanc. Okay,
I love that.
And if you make me drink hard alcohol, it's a skinny margarita.
Really? I don't think I knew that about you. I knew white wine. Yeah.
Only if I have to do hard alcohol, I will only do tequila.
Really?
Yeah, I'll take a shot of tequila. Well, I mean, I don't want to take a shot, but if it had to come down to it, really? I had to enter something or save the person's life, I would take a shot of tequila.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Okay. I love that. I love tequila. So I can't drink that anymore because it hurts my stomach, but I know it's too much. Okay. What about your favorite podcast to listen to, or just give me one that you're listening to right now?
Okay. Oh my God, there's so many. Oh no. I really like Trading Secrets by Jason Tardik. Okay. Because he brings someone on and he talks about the money they made and how they made it and the numbers. And then at the end, he does a roundup with a fellow co-host at the end. Yeah. And I'm someone who loves talking about money. I love hearing about money. I do this thing where I try to figure out how much money entrepreneurs make. Which is really, I don't think.
Is that kind of like people watching when you look at them, you're like, I wonder what they do. And you're just kind of like.
Well, if someone says, oh, we sold out. And then I look at their landing page and then I figure out how much it costs and how many slots are available. And then I add it up and figure out how much they made. I just do a lot. And then I'll look at all their services, how much it costs on average, how many clients they have. And then I'll do some quick basic math and come up with a range.
I feel like I'm way too assuming now.
I just love knowing how much money people make.
Yeah, I
love talking about money. It's my favorite. I just love it. I'll scream it at the rooftops. My husband gets so embarrassed. I'm over if anyone's not comfortable with money, I will tell you why you should be. So
I'm the same way.
That podcast is really great because it what's it called? Reveals the curtain.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, totally.
That one's really beautiful. And then I'm really grateful Melissa Wood just started her podcast, Move with Heart. It does come out every other Wednesday, which
she just started though.
I know. I get it. Yeah. Kind of sucks. And then of course the Skinny Confidential, the End My Let podcast, Amy Porterfield's podcast. I go for marketing strategy. That one's really great. Yeah, there's a bunch.
Okay. I love it.
Sorry, that wasn't fun.
No, that's okay. That was great. Well, I'm forgetting the other rapid fire questions, but where can everyone find you?
I'm also never prepared like you are.
I know. Isn't that great though? Yeah, it makes every interview just like an Easter egg.
Yeah. It's like a surprise. It's a pleasant surprise. You can follow me on Instagram at Scout Sobel. It's the best place. Has in my bio, all the stuff on my podcasts. And you can buy my book, The Emotional Entrepreneur, on Amazon. Okay, I'll link everything. Thanks, Scout, for going under the end of... Oh, shit. Oh, you're not even drinking, and you're not even pregnant, so I don't know what your excuse is. I brought the energy, okay, Whitney? I'm exhausted and haven't had a drink in 4 months. I brought the energy. Whitney's like, I just came back from a weekend in Sonoma, bitch. I'm like, Whitney's Instagram stories is my reality TV at this point. And isn't that terrible? Because I hid a lot of it. There was a lot more behind the scenes. Oh, I'm sure. I just didn't, all right. Thanks for going under the influence. I got to sign out now. Love you.